The wind slammed against the broken boards of Frank Miller's barn, howling like a wounded animal as he fought to keep the last surviving Mare on her feet. Snow burst through the gaps in violent gusts, stinging his eyes, freezing his breath before it left his lips. The lantern beside him flickered, then died, swallowed by the blizzard raging outside. Darkness took over, heavy and absolute. "Come on, girl. Stay with me," Frank muttered, pressing his shoulder against the trembling horse. The animal's legs buckled again. He could feel her ribs shaking beneath his hands, the fever burning through her like wildfire. Another one sick. Another one lost if he failed tonight. The storm roared harder, as if mocking him. Frank's own injured leg throbbed sharply, threatening to fold under his weight. The bullet wound months old, still refusing to heal, made every movement a battle. But if he let this Mare fall, the ranch would lose its last breeding animal. It would be the final nail in the coffin. A blast of icy wind ripped the barn door open. Frank lunged to catch it and froze. A figure stood in the doorway, snow swirling around her like she'd been carved out of the storm itself. A woman, wrapped in a threadbare cloak, cheeks raw from the cold, clutching a small worn suitcase against her chest. Her eyes wide, steady, impossibly calm, locked onto his. "Mr. Miller?" Her voice shook, but not from fear. "I'm Hope Alden, your Christmas bride." For a moment, Frank wondered if the blizzard had finally driven him to hallucinations. He had written to the agency months ago, in a moment of loneliness and desperation, and then forgotten about it when the ranch began to collapse piece by piece. He'd never expected a reply. Certainly not this. The Mare let out a weak cry and collapsed onto her side. Hope didn't hesitate. Dropping her suitcase, she rushed forward and knelt in the hay beside the horse. Her hands moved with quick, practiced certainty, checking the gums, feeling the pulse, lifting the eyelids. "She's dehydrated, fevered, but she can be saved," Hope said, determination sharpening her voice. I used to assist a doctor back home. Let me help." Frank stared at her, stunned not by her arrival, but by the steady fire in her tone, a fire he hadn't heard in his own voice for years. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, for the first time in a long time, something else stirred. A spark of hope. The blizzard eased by morning, but the cold inside the Miller barn lingered like a warning. Frank hadn't slept. He sat against the stall wall with the recovering Mare's head resting in his lap, while Hope worked tirelessly through the night. She moved with an odd blend of gentleness and precision, mixing herbs she'd carried in small paper envelopes, boiling water over a tiny flame she'd nursed from near nothing, whispering steady reassurances to the frightened animal. When dawn finally bled across the snow, Frank felt the Mare's breathing slow into a calmer rhythm. "You kept her alive," he murmured, unable to hide the awe in his voice. Hope didn't smile. Not yet. She wiped her hands on her skirt, leaving faint smudges of medicine and soot. "She's not out of danger, but she's fighting now. And that means something." Frank pushed himself to his feet, his leg burning like fire. Hope noticed instantly. "You should sit," she said. "Can't, too much to fix." He stepped outside the barn, and Hope followed. The view before them looked like ruin itself, the fences buried in drifts, the fields dead beneath sheets of ice. The chicken coop roof caved in from snow weight. A lifetime of work, broken in half a season. Hope's gaze swept the land, but instead of despair, Frank saw calculation in her eyes, thoughtful, searching. "How long has it been like this?" she asked quietly. "Since the drought," he said. "Then the sickness. Then winter came early. Everything hit at once." "And you handled it alone?" "I tried." She studied him, and Frank felt exposed under that steady look. Not judged, understood somehow. "No one can carry that much burden and stay standing," she said. "But you did." He didn't know how to answer that, so he didn't. Instead, he nodded toward the house. "You should come inside. Warm up, eat something. You must be half frozen." Hope hesitated, as if unsure she had the right. "Thank you, Mr. Miller." "It's Frank," he said. "If you're staying, we might as well start with that." Her eyes softened almost imperceptibly. "All right, Frank." The name felt different coming from her lighter somehow. But the fragile moment broke when a sudden cracking sound split the air. Frank's attention snapped toward the old water tower on the hill. A support beam had shifted, listing dangerously. "Damn, if that goes, we lose the whole supply." He grabbed his coat, ignoring Hope's concerned frown, and started toward the hill. "Frank, wait your leg." "Little hold." But as he took another step, Hope hurried after him. "Then I'm coming with you." He opened his mouth to argue, but the determination in her eyes disarmed him completely. Together, they braced themselves against the wind and trudged toward the failing tower. For the first time in a long while, Frank didn't feel like he was going into a fight alone. The climb up the hill was brutal. Snow swallowed their boots with every step, and the wind tore at their coats as if trying to shove them back down. Frank grit his teeth through the pain in his injured leg, determined not to stumble in front of Hope, but she kept a steady pace beside him, matching his stride without complaint. When they reached the tower, the problem became painfully clear. One of the main beams, already weak from age, had cracked nearly clean through. With enough pressure from the wind or weight from the ice, the entire structure could collapse. Frank ran a hand along the split wood, his frustration simmering. "I was going to fix this weeks ago. Then everything else went wrong." Hope inspected the beam with surprising confidence. "We need reinforcement. Something to brace it until you can replace it properly." He glanced at her, impressed despite himself. "You know your way around more than just medicine. I grew up helping my father repair half our town's problems," she said with a small shrug. "When something's broken, you learn to fix it or you lose it." Frank nodded to himself. That was a language he understood. They worked quickly, scavenging spare planks from a nearby shed and aligning them against the damaged beam. Hope held the boards steady while Frank hammered them into place. His leg trembled, sending sharp jolts of pain up his thigh. But he forced himself to keep going. At one point, the hammer slipped from his numb fingers. Before he could reach for it, Hope stepped in, placing her gloved hand over his. "Let me," she said softly. He hesitated, pride flickering, but finally stepped aside. Hope took the hammer, her motions confident and sure as she drove the nails home. The rhythmic strikes echoed across the frozen land, steady and unshaken. When she finished, Frank tested the support beam. Solid, safe for now. "You saved it," he said. "We saved it," she corrected. As they descended the hill, the storm clouds finally began to break apart. Sunlight filtered through, casting long golden streaks across the snow. Frank hadn't seen the ranch in sunlight for weeks. Under its glow, even the broken fences and ice-heavy roofs looked less like failures and more like challenges waiting to be met. "You came here expecting a husband," he said, surprising himself with the honesty of it. "Instead, you walked straight into all this." Hope looked out across the land, the worn house, the struggling barn, the distant fields buried beneath winter, and instead of fear, her eyes filled with something else entirely. Purpose. "I came here because someone needed me," she said. "And maybe I needed this place too." Frank didn't know what to say, but for the first time in months, the weight on his chest eased. As they reached the barn, the mare lifted her head and let out a soft, steady whinny stronger than before. Hope smiled, and Frank realized something he hadn't dared admit until now. The ranch wasn't the only thing being brought back to life. The next morning brought a brittle silence, the kind that settles after a storm. But before the world remembers how to breathe again, Frank stepped outside, steam curling from his coffee tin as he scanned the ranch. The fences were still broken, the fields still frozen. But something felt different, less hopeless, more waiting. Inside the barn, Hope was already awake. Frank found her kneeling beside the Mare, who now stood on shaky legs, nibbling at a handful of hay with renewed appetite. Hope murmured gentle encouragement, her voice warm enough to soften the coldest corners of the barn. "You work miracles," Frank said quietly. Hope glanced up, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Not miracles, just care. Every living fights if you give it reason." He didn't reply, but the words lodged in him. Maybe he'd stopped giving himself reason long ago. Hope stood and stretched her stiff shoulders. "What's next on the ranch? What needs us today?" U.S. The word struck him unexpectedly. "A lot," he admitted. "The chicken coop collapsed. The feed stores are half ruined. And the south pasture fencing is hanging by threads." Hope considered all of it without flinching. "Then we'll start where the animals need us most." Frank let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You say that like you've already decided you're staying." She didn't look away. "I am staying, Frank. I made a promise when I got on that train." He swallowed the sudden tightness in his throat. Hope didn't speak the word bride, but its presence hung between them like a question neither dared voice yet. Before he could respond, a harsh groan of wood split the air. Frank stiffened. The co-op. They hurried toward the structure, where snow had crushed half the roof and sealed the door shut. From inside came frantic clucking. Frank braced his shoulder against the door and pushed, gritting his teeth as pain tore through his injured leg. "Frank, stop," Hope said quickly. "You'll hurt yourself. These hens are all we've got left for spring laying." "I can't." But Hope was already kneeling, inspecting the base of the door. She grabbed a broken rail, wedged it beneath the snow-packed edge, and leveraged her weight downward. The door cracked free. "Push now," she said. Together, they forced it open, and a flurry of terrified hens burst into the snow. Hope moved fast, herding them gently, guiding them toward the open barn. Frank watched her work, calm, instinctive, commanding chaos with nothing but patience and certainty. When the last hen scrambled to safety, Hope wiped the frost from her cheeks. "We need a temporary shelter and a dry place for their feed," she said. Frank blinked. "You already have a plan." "I've had a plan since I stepped off that train," she admitted. "One step at a time, remember?" Frank stared at her, the truth settling in deeply. Hope wasn't just helping him survive winter. She was dragging him back into life itself. By midday, snow began melting under a pale sun, revealing the battered state of the co-op. Frank measured the splintered beams, while Hope sifted through the scattered feed bags, salvaging what she could. "Most of this is usable," she said, inspecting a handful of grain. "If we dry it by the stove, it won't mold." Frank nodded. "I'll rebuild the coop frame. Shouldn't take more than a few days if the weather holds." "Then I'll help," Hope said simply. He hesitated. "It's heavy work. Hard work. I didn't come here for easy work." The conviction in her voice sent a strange warmth through him, one he wasn't prepared to feel. They began clearing debris. The rhythm of shared labor built between them. Frank lifting busted planks, Hope clearing snow and stacking salvageable pieces with surprising strength. Every so often their hands brushed, sending small jolts of awareness that neither acknowledged but both felt. When Hope paused to catch her breath, Frank found himself watching her, not out of curiosity, but out of quiet admiration. She carried exhaustion in her posture, but determination in her eyes. "You know," Frank said softly, "most folks would have turned back the moment they saw this place." Hope straightened, brushing off her gloves. "Most folks haven't lived through worse." He studied her for a moment. "What did you live through?" The question hung in the air, fragile and sharp. Hope's expression shifted. Something shadowed, flickered behind her composed exterior. "A town that didn't want me," she said finally. "A life that didn't fit me. And people who saw my skills as a threat, not a gift." Frank frowned. "Threat? Medicine saves lives. Not to those who think healing should only belong to men," she said quietly. The bitter edge in her voice told him more than the words. Frank stepped closer, not invading her space, but enough that she felt the sincerity behind his voice. "Hope, I'm damn grateful you're here. And if anyone ever made you feel small for what you can do, they're fools." Her breath caught slightly, but she didn't look away. Before she could respond, a sudden distant howl carried across the hills low. Sharp, unmistakably close. Frank stiffened. "Wolves." Hope's eyes snapped toward the tree line. "Are the cattle safe?" "They will be," Frank said, reaching for his rifle, leaning against the fence. He checked the chamber with practiced speed. "Stay close. They usually don't come this far down unless hunger's driven them bold." Hope picked up a lantern. "Then let's go." Frank blinked, startled not by the danger, but by her fearlessness. They moved across the field, the snow crunching beneath their boots, shadows stretching long across the frozen ground. The cattle huddled nervously near the far fence, their breath steaming in the cold air. Another howl broke through the stillness closer this time. Hope drew nearer to him, not out of fear, out of solidarity. Frank lifted his rifle, scanning the tree line. The wolves were coming. The storm eased by morning, leaving the ranch wrapped in a fragile, blinding quiet. Inside the house, the fire had burned low, its glow flickering across the wooden floor. Frank limped into the kitchen, expecting to find Hope resting after the chaos of the night, but instead, she sat at the table, the ranch ledger open in front of her, brows drawn in concentration. He froze in the doorway. "That's private," he said, sharper than he intended. Hope didn't flinch. "I know. But you're running this place on willpower alone. And willpower doesn't pay debts." She turned the book toward him. "Frank, the ranch is in worse condition than you've admitted." He closed the distance slowly, leaning on the table with both hands. "I didn't ask you to fix my problems." "No," she said quietly, "but you brought me here. And I'm not going to watch everything fall apart while you pretend nothing's wrong." Frank exhaled, the fight draining from his shoulders. "I've been trying to hold it together since the drought. The sickness, the winters. Every season takes something more." Hope's expression softened. "You've been carrying all of it alone for too long." She stood, gathering papers she'd spread across the table notes. Small sketches, a rough plan taking shape. "I think I can help. You need structure, a clear path forward, and someone who isn't afraid to tell you the truth." Frank stared at the drawings, rotating pastures, medicinal treatments, proper feed storage, and something inside him shifted. A mix of hope and fear. "You really believe this place can be saved?" he asked. "Yes," she said, "but only if we start now." He sank into a chair, rubbing his forehead. "I don't know if I have anything left to give." Hope circled the table and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Then let me give something. Let us share the burden." For a moment, neither spoke. The fire cracked softly. Outside, wind whispered against the glass. "You're not what I expected when I heard mail order bride," Frank said finally. Hope smiled faintly. "Good, I'd hate to be ordinary." The tension eased, replaced by a warm, quiet understanding. Frank nodded toward the ledger. "Show me your plan." Hope's eyes brightened. She sat beside him, pointing to each section with steady confidence. "First, we stabilize the livestock. Then we rebuild the fences. After that, we restore the soil before spring planting." Frank listened, not because he agreed with everything, but because he trusted her voice. When she finished, he let out a slow breath. "All right," he said. "We'll do it your way." Hope met his gaze. "No, our way. A partnership. Uneasy, unexpected, and exactly what both of them needed." The rest of the day passed in steady, determined work. Hope moved through the barn with purpose, checking feed levels, examining the recovering mare, and taking notes with disciplined focus. Frank repaired loose boards on the stalls, glancing at her more often than he cared to admit. Each time he found her absorbed, calm, and capable, like she had lived on this ranch far longer than a few days. When the sun dipped behind the hills, the temperature dropped sharply. Frank stepped outside to gather the tools and caught sight of Hope near the corral, staring out across the frozen fields. Snow drifted in thin sheets, the sky turning violet. "You should be inside warming up," he called. She didn't move. "I've been thinking," she said softly. "People in town, they don't trust you, or this land." Frank stopped beside her, jaw tightening. "They think I'm stubborn, that I don't listen. Are they wrong?" Hope asked, not unkindly. He let out a breath that clouded the air. "Maybe not." Hope looked at him, her expression gentle. "Frank, people fear what's falling apart. They back away from sinking things, even if they could help. But they also follow strength, stability. If they see this ranch rising again, they'll come around." He studied her face, lit by fading daylight. "You talk like you've lived this before." "I have," she said quietly. "In the town I left, people stopped trusting me when they didn't understand my skills. I couldn't heal their fear." She shrugged. "But I can help heal this." Frank wanted to ask more, but her voice carried a finality that told him she wasn't ready. They stood in silence, listening to the wind whistle through the fence rails. Finally, Hope turned toward the barn. "Come on. The animals need settling before night." Inside, the lantern cast long, warm shadows across the stalls. Frank handed her a blanket for the mare, and their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away. For a heartbeat, the air thickened, unspoken emotions swirling like the snow outside. Hope broke the moment gently. "If we work together, we can rebuild faster than you think." Frank swallowed. "I'm starting to believe that." She smiled, small, quick, but real. "Good, because tomorrow we start early." Frank nodded, watching her move through the barn with confidence and quiet grace. She checked each animal, whispering soft reassurance. He realized with something like awe that her presence didn't just warm the ranch. It steadied him, strengthened him. As they left the barn, Hope paused at the door, eyes lifting to the dark sky. "Storm's coming again," she murmured. Frank looked at her silhouette outlined by lantern light. "Then we face it together." Hope met his gaze, and for the first time didn't look away. Outside, the wind rose, carrying snow across the night. Inside, something else took root, fragile but undeniable. A beginning. The next morning broke with a pale, icy sun that barely warmed the frost on the ground. Frank stepped outside, bracing against the sharp wind. The ranch still bore scars from winter-broken rails, half-buried tools. Weak animals moving slowly in the cold, but something had changed. Hope's plan from the night before lingered in his mind, steadying him as he surveyed the work ahead. Hope was already in the yard, sleeves rolled, hair tied back, hauling a bucket of feed toward the barn. She glanced up with a smile that carried both exhaustion and determination. "You're late," she teased. Frank snorted, Sun's barely up. And so are we, she said, handing him a second bucket. Together they crossed the yard. Their breath rose in clouds as they fed the cattle and checked the fences. Frank watched the way Hope moved focused, sure-footed, unfazed by cold or hard labor. She was smaller than him, but her presence filled the space beside him with a confidence he had not known in years. When they finished tending the herd, Frank paused near the barn door. "Hope, about last night. About us working together," he hesitated. Words snagging on pride and something deeper. Hope nodded, waiting. "I'm not used to leaning on anyone," he admitted. "But you're right. I need help." "You don't need help," she corrected gently. "You need a partner." Frank met her eyes. A quiet understanding passed between them, just long enough to unsettle him. Before he could say more, distant voices echoed from the road. Frank stiffened. Hope turned, squinting toward the noise. 3 townsfolk approached, bundled in coats, carrying tools over their shoulders. Frank's jaw tightened. "They're here to see whether we're failing," he muttered. Hope stepped closer. "Or maybe they're here to help. People can surprise you." Frank wasn't convinced. As the group drew near, the man in front, Tom Hargreaves, lifted a hand in greeting. "Heard the storm hit you hard," he said. "Figured you could use some extra hands." Frank stared, caught between suspicion and reluctant gratitude. Hope nudged him lightly. "Say thank you," she whispered. He did. The men spread out across the yard, fixing rails, clearing snow, checking the barn roof. Hope joined them, guiding the work with calm assurance. Frank found himself watching her again, how easily she spoke to others, how naturally people responded. After an hour of labor, one of the men approached Frank. "Your wife knows her way around a ranch," he said approvingly. Frank stiffened, unsure how to answer. Hope overheard and simply smiled, leaving the assumption uncorrected. When the helpers finally left, Frank and Hope stood alone in the quiet yard. Much of the ranch looked steadier, fences repaired, animals calmer, paths cleared. "You see?" Hope said softly. "Strength inspires trust." Frank looked at her, the cold wind brushing between them. "Maybe," he said, "but that strength is yours." Hope shook her head. "No, Frank, it's ours now." By late afternoon, the wind sharpened, scraping across the plains like a cold blade. Frank and Hope finished securing the last section of fence before turning toward the barn. Hope brushed snow from her gloves, cheeks flushed from the long day. "You worked harder than anyone I've ever seen," Frank said. Hope gave a small smile. "Hard work doesn't scare me. Losing something worth fighting for does." Her words hit deeper than she intended. And for a moment, Frank didn't know how to answer. Inside the barn, the fading sunlight bled through the wooden slats, casting warm stripes across the stalls. The mare lifted her head as they entered, stronger than she'd been in weeks. Hope moved to her immediately, checking her pulse, running a gentle hand down her neck. "She's improving," Hope said softly. Frank leaned on the stall door. "Because of you." Hope shook her head. "Because of us. You kept this ranch alive long before I ever arrived." Frank looked at her, throat tightening. "Barely." Hope met his eyes, her expression steady. "Barely is still alive." Before he could respond, heavy footsteps sounded outside. The barn door swung open, and Elias stepped inside, shaking snow from his coat. His stare landed first on Frank, then on Hope, and finally on the mare, alive and recovering despite everything. "So it's true," Elias said. "You've got help." Frank's jaw tensed. "What do you want?" Eliza smirked. "To see how long your luck holds. Winter's not done yet, and neither are your debts." Hope stepped forward, voice firm. "Threats won't fix anything, Elias. He glanced at her with dismissive amusement. "I wasn't talking to you." Frank took a step closer, eyes darkening. "Then talk carefully." For a long moment, only the wind outside filled the silence. Elias scanned the barn one last time, then shrugged. "We'll see how long this place stands." He left without another word. Hope let out a slow breath. He enjoys intimidation more than truth. "He enjoys watching things break," Frank muttered. "And he thinks this ranch is next." Hope touched his arm. "Then prove him wrong." Frank looked down at her hand resting on his sleeve, small, steady, grounding. Something warm stirred inside him, cutting through the cold that had settled in his chest for years. They finished the evening chores side by side. As they walked back toward the house, the ranch behind them looked tired but no longer defeated. Smoke rose from the chimney, glowing faintly against the icy dusk. Inside, Hope lit a lamp and hung her coat. Frank hesitated near the door, watching her move through the quiet room as if she belonged there. "You know," he said softly, "when you arrived, I thought you were here to survive the winter. Nothing more." Hope turned to him. "Frank, I didn't come here to survive. I came here to rebuild." Their eyes held steady, searching, unguarded. Outside, the wind howled, but for the first time, the house felt strong against it. The storm arrived before dawn, a roaring white wall that swallowed the plains and hammered the ranch with violent winds. Frank woke to the sound of shutters, rattling and snow beating against the windows like thrown gravel. The house trembled, the air sharp and cold. Hope was already up, wrapping a scarf around her neck. "Animals first," she said. No hesitation, no fear. Frank grabbed his coat and followed her into the storm. Outside, the world was nothing but swirling snow. The wind shoved them sideways, stealing breath from their lungs. Frank pushed ahead, keeping Hope close as they fought their way toward the barn. Snow stung their faces, their boots sinking deep with every step. When they reached the barn doors, Frank forced one open, and they stumbled inside, breathless. The animals were restless, stamping, snorting, frightened by the storm's roar. Hope went straight to the mare, whispering calm words, gentling her touch. Frank checked the structure, listening for cracking beams, looking for loose boards. "We may need to reinforce the north wall," he said over the wind. "If it gives, the roof could follow." Hope didn't hesitate. "Tell me what to do." They worked quickly, dragging planks, hammering braces into place, tightening ropes around beams. The cold bit through their gloves, their fingers stiff and burning, but they kept going. Each crash of wind pressed the barn harder, as if the storm itself were trying to tear everything away. At one point, a loud crack split through the rafters. The mare shrieked. Hope spun toward Frank, eyes wide. "What was that?" "South beam," Frank said grimly. "Hold the lantern." She did, despite the tremor in her hands. Frank climbed onto a support rail and hammered a brace into place. The storm screamed outside, shaking the boards beneath his feet. When he jumped down, Hope grabbed his arm. "You can't keep doing this alone." "I'm not alone," he said, breath fogging the cold air. The words were simple, but the weight of them stopped her. For a moment, they stood in the dim lantern light, snow pounding the roof, animals shifting nervously. The whole world reduced to cold wood and warm breath. Then another gust hit, fierce enough to push dust and straw across the floor. Hope squared her shoulders. "We need to check the feed stores. If the storm lasts all day, the animals will panic." Frank nodded. Together, they moved through the barn, securing loose crates, covering sacks, tightening hinges. Hope's movements were quick, practiced, confident, far more than any mail-order bride should have been capable of. Frank noticed but said nothing. By the time they finished, the wind had grown even stronger, shaking the barn with each blast. Hope wiped her brow, breath uneven. "If the roof holds, we can get through this." Frank stepped closer, lowering his voice. "It will hold, because you're here." Hope looked up at him, eyes bright, cheeks flushed, courage shining through the fear. Hours passed with the storm unrelenting, each gust stronger than the one before. Frank and Hope moved, constantly checking supports, calming the animals, clearing drifts from the inner walkway so the doors wouldn't jam. Their energy thinned, but neither slowed. At midday, a violent crack split through the barn like a gunshot. Dust rained from the rafters. Frank jerked toward the sound. "That came from outside," he said. They pushed through the barn doors into the blinding white. The wind slammed into them, forcing them to lean forward to stay upright. Snow whipped across the yard, erasing the fences and fields in swirling sheets. Visibility shrank to a few feet. Hope pointed toward the far corner of the house. "Something's wrong, look." A section of the roof had begun to peel upward under the pressure of the storm. Shingles ripped loose, spinning into the wind like dark birds. Frank cursed it under his breath. If that lifts, the whole side could collapse. Without waiting, he ran toward the ladder propped against the wall. Hope followed, grabbing the bottom to steady it as he climbed. The wind howled, nearly knocking him sideways. Snow stung his face. His hands burned from cold. "Frank!" Hope shouted over the storm. "Be careful." He reached the damaged section and forced his weight onto the boards, trying to press them back into place. The wind fought him like a living thing. He hammered nails into the plank, his fingers numb. Beneath him, Hope held the ladder with all her strength, boots braced in the snow. A sudden blast hit, stronger than any before. The ladder jerked, ripping from Hope's grip. She threw herself forward, grabbing it again just as it slid. Frank lost his footing and slammed down onto the roof, the edge crumbling beneath him. "Frank!" Hope cried, voice breaking. "I'm fine," he shouted, though the world spun beneath him. He crawled back to stability, hammer still in hand. Hope's face was pale, fear raw in her eyes. "Please don't fall. I can't lose you." The words struck him harder than the wind. With renewed determination, Frank forced the last plank down and secured it. When he finally descended, Hope caught him the moment his boots hit the ground, hands trembling as they gripped his coat. "You could have died," she whispered. "But I didn't," he said softly. "Because you were here." For a moment, the storm was only a distant roar. Hope's breath warmed the cold space between them. Their foreheads touched briefly, tenderly before another gust forced them to move. "Come on," Frank said. "The animals need us." They hurried back to the barn, fighting the wind step by step. Inside, the air was warmer, the lantern still burning. Hope rested her hand on Frank's arm, steadying herself. "We made it through the worst," she said. He looked at her, truly looked, and felt something settle in his chest. Something strong, something certain. "We made it," he agreed, voice low. "Together."